Okay, welcome everyone to this virtual session at Capitol Hill Oceans Week. My name is Amanda Chiachi. I'm a 2023 Knaus Fellow at NOAA, and today I'll be running our session supporting a climate-ready nation, NOAA's CDR research strategy. The Biden administration is working aggressively to tackle the climate crisis, including the signing of historic funding to help America become a climate-ready nation. This session will discuss a new NOAA research initiative within the blue economy. This is the development of an agency-wide carbon dioxide removal, or CDR, research strategy. Alongside emissions reductions, climate interventions like CDR will be an essential activity helping to meet US climate targets and begin to stabilize Earth's climate system. At this session, we'll discuss NOAA's climate-ready nation targets, climate intervention programs, the finalized CDR research strategy, and hear from two of NOAA's important interagency and private sector partners helping to shape the future of our ocean economy while building a climate-ready nation. First, I'd like to invite Dr. Sarah Kapnick, NOAA's chief scientist, to offer some remarks about NOAA's climate-ready nation portfolio. Dr. Kapnick is chief scientist for NOAA. In this role, Dr. Kapnick is responsible for advancing policy and program direction for NOAA's science and technology priorities. Dr. Kapnick has extensive experience at the intersection of climate science and economics. Most recently, she served as a managing director at JP Morgan in the role of senior climate scientist and sustainability strategist for asset and wealth management. While at JP Morgan, she supported sustainability and climate action efforts and served as an advisor on new business and investment opportunities and risks. Previously, Dr. Kapnick was a physical scientist and deputy division leader on seasonal to decadal variability and predictability at NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. With both Dr. Kapnick's science and economic background in mind, please welcome her to open our session today.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And thank you to everyone joining us late in the day. As Amanda just said, my name is Dr. Sarah Kapnick, and I am NOAA's chief scientist. NOAA's work to assess, understand, and predict the ocean and its role in climate and share this knowledge, as well as its efforts to build resilience and mitigate climate change, is critical to the people in the United States and around the world. As an authoritative source of climate information, one of our top priorities is leveraging that information to build a climate-ready nation. I believe one of the most important parts of my role as chief scientist is to ensure that NOAA is at the forefront of developing new science to meet the challenges that are coming from climate change. This is part of why I am so excited today to be introducing NOAA's new carbon dioxide removal research strategy. As an internationally recognized leader in science, environmental stewardship, and community resilience, NOAA is well positioned to lead in the analysis of impact, effectiveness, feasibility, and risk of many CDR techniques to ensure that we are able to realize both the climate benefits and the economic potential of carbon management. This strategy provides NOAA's research direction from contributing to the goals of the Biden administration and Congress, and will inform carbon management activities happening across the federal government and with academic and private sector partners. Carbon dioxide removal techniques, or CDR, would transfer atmospheric carbon into long-term storage in the ocean, forests, soils, and geologic formations, directly addressing the main drivers of anthropogenic climate change. Scientific assessments, including those from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, conclude that the global average temperatures will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels unless global greenhouse gas emissions are deeply reduced in the next few decades, net zero emissions are achieved by the middle of the century, and net negative emissions are reached before 2100. There are growing concerns that current carbon emission policies and pledges are insufficient to achieve these targets. It will take decades for emissions reductions and carbon dioxide removal approaches to scale up to achieve net zero net negative emissions. Many scientists and policymakers are advocating for rapid development of research programs to understand the potential risks and benefits of directly intervening in the climate system to reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. Within this context, the CDR industry is growing rapidly and could be as much as 1 trillion market by 2050, according to McKinsey. Given that I have focused much of my career on trying to understand the economics of climate change, it's exciting to see an energetic and thriving early market for climate solutions. However, many CDR methods are currently in their infancy. This is especially true of CDR methods that impact the oceans, an important note here on Capitol Hill Oceans Week. Overall, current CDR capacity falls about 80% short of the requirements suggested by the IPCC. Future deployment of technologies that are found to be efficient, effective, and acceptable will still take considerable time to scale up. In the broader landscape of CDR research, NOAA has the right expertise to assess the efficiency, effectiveness, and environmental impact of marine and terrestrial CDR techniques proposed by non-NOAA entities. This is likely to require a portfolio of NOAA science, including carbon observations, environmental monitoring, modeling, technology development, and decision support. In particular, we want to ensure that any carbon dioxide removal techniques that are implemented as part of the growing blue economy have a well-known risk-benefit profile. NOAA's science and stewardship missions can help evaluate CDR strategies and implementations to ensure that they are safe, sustainable, and fair. We believe that the time is now to start this research. This decade is critical time to address the climate crisis. We have a small window to shift to a carbon neutral economy and hold climate impacts in check. We must enact transformational change at the national level, but we must also harness the power of collective ambition and the call to action at every level and across sectors to solve this challenge together. NOAA's portfolio of climate intervention research can help do that. Thank you, and I now pass it along to Amanda.
Thank you, Dr. Kapnick. I'm going to go ahead and share the next presentation. Let's see. Okay, can you all see that?
Now we can.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So our next speaker is Dr. Michelle McClure. Dr. McClure joined PMEL in February 2019 as the 4th director. McClure has 20 years of research and leadership experience with NOAA Fisheries, where she made significant contributions to fisheries science for sustainable fisheries and protected resources. Today, she comes to us as a member of the NOAA CDR Task Team Advisory Board to offer some remarks about NOAA's role in climate interventions.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I do want to note that I understand that there's some fluidity in the term climate intervention in the world right now. And I guess I just ask that you all recognize the noble intent behind our use of the term climate interventions. So our interest overall in climate interventions has two parts. First is our tacit mandate and our interest in how carbon dioxide removal will affect the Earth system. And the second is NOAA's funded research in solar radiation management. Next slide, please, Amanda. Thanks. In both these areas, it's useful and important to note that NOAA has the relevant expertise to address the scientific foundations of CDR, carbon dioxide removal, and solar radiation management, SRM. And that includes many of the world's experts in atmospheric physics and chemistry, in climate science, oceanography, fisheries, and living marine resources. NOAA provides the critical infrastructure needed to understand the climate mitigation toolboxes, which includes a worldwide array of observing systems, a deep understanding of Earth system processes, the most respected and accurate Earth system models, and a mandate for ecosystem management. We translate all this work into information products and systems to provide specially tailored support for policy decisions, scientific assessments, risk assessments, and spatial planning tools, among a portfolio of many other services that we provide to decision makers and communities. With regard to climate intervention specifically, NOAA has congressional mandate and appropriations for a comprehensive research program to study the scientific foundation of solar radiation management approaches and impacts. I'll provide a little bit more detail on this program and then circle back to NOAA's emerging interest in carbon dioxide removal, which is the key topic that we're discussing today. Next slide, please. So NOAA is currently the only federal agency with congressional support for a comprehensive research program to study the scientific foundation of solar radiation management approaches and impacts. So in response to a 2020 congressional mandate, NOAA formed the Earth's Radiation Budget Initiative. The initiative manages a budget that has increased to $9.5 million this year. And the initiative oversees research efforts involving 6 NOAA laboratories, cooperative institutes associated with those laboratories, a number of academic institutions, and several other federal partners. And the aim of that initiative is really to improve our understanding of the energy balance of the Earth system. Next slide, please. So through the ERB, the Earth's Radiation Budget Initiative, NOAA is providing baseline observations of the stratosphere that characterize its chemical composition and that lead to an understanding of the sources of change in this important part of the Earth system. We use balloon-borne and aircraft measurements to help explain how natural phenomena like volcanic eruptions and wildfires, those of you in the DC area are noting that one right now, but how those phenomena impact stratospheric composition in the Earth's climate. Observations supported by the ERB initiative will provide a basis for understanding changes in the stratosphere from potential SRM approaches and have the potential to serve as an early warning system for unannounced testing of stratospheric climate intervention. These observations provide a critical test bed for evaluating and improving the numerical models that are a key tool for assessing the impacts of current and future known sources of aerosols in the stratosphere, including volcanic eruptions, wildfires, and space travel also. Modeling studies are the primary method for understanding the efficacy and the unintended consequences of proposed solar radiation management approaches, such as aerosol injection to the stratosphere and marine cloud brightening. The ERB supports assessments of the research gaps that need to be overcome in order to evaluate the efficacy and unintended consequences of these approaches. Regardless of whether such climate interventions are ever deployed, improvements to the models that we use for the Earth system from these research studies are likely to lead to the co-benefits of improving weather forecasts and improving climate projections in our changing world. The research from this initiative will provide a solid scientific foundation to inform decision makers weighing the options for managing the risks of anthropogenic climate change. Next slide, please. So back to NOAA's engagement with carbon dioxide removal, which is really the heart of today's presentation. Our engagement in this area with CDR is at a much earlier phase than with solar radiation management, but there's a lot of interest in our potential portfolio. So in response to direct requests from private industry, from NGOs, and from interest from Congress, NOAA's convened an internal group of scientists to help articulate the agency's connection to carbon dioxide removal research, including how this work relates to our legislative mandates from Congress. We see key connections between CDR and all 3 of NOAA's core missions: science, service, and stewardship. This is very similar to the model that NOAA has adopted for SRM. In our next presentation, we'll go into more detail on NOAA's CDR strategy. Briefly, I'll highlight that our agency is focused, as we always are, on our science, service, and stewardship missions. We research and model the potential efficacy of climate intervention projects, protecting living marine resources by exploring the potential risks and co-benefits of those strategies, and supporting decision makers and communities as they seek evidence-based information that can support safe, sustainable, and fair deployments. With that context in mind, I'll hand this off to Amanda to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. McClure. Next up, we have Dr. Jessica Cross, Research Oceanographer.
Amanda, you're muted.
Oh, can you hear me?
Very quiet.
Interesting. Can you hear me now? Okay, I'll just be very loud. Thank you, Dr. McClure. Next up, we have Dr. Jessica Cross, research oceanographer at NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory. Dr. Cross is the lead author of the NOAA CDR research strategy and leads the NOAA CDR task force with Drs. Dwight Glendhill and Colm Sweeney. She also serves as the CDR co-lead under NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program with Dr. Gabriella Kitch.
Thanks, Amanda. So as you said, today I'm here representing the NOAA CDR task team as the lead author of our draft research strategy, our final research strategy, actually. Up front, I wanted to provide you all today with a brief outline of the content that I plan to walk through. I want to start by introducing our author team and then move into a discussion of why our agency felt motivated to begin with to develop a research strategy for CDR science at NOAA. Then I'll share a few key findings with you and discuss how those findings are motivating some current work at the agency. So first of all, I'll note that the CDR task team at NOAA has about 65 members in it, more than 30 of which were contributing authors to our CDR research strategy. And so at the start, I really want to take a moment to recognize this entire team, and beyond that, especially our collaborators outside the agency. So throughout our process, deciding to draft this strategy, and then in preparing our analysis and our text, we worked hard to find diverse representation across NOAA programs, engage multiple other groups exploring CDR science, and collaborate and cross-plan with our colleagues at other agencies and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as well as those in the private sector and NGO spheres. We know that research and implementation of negative emissions science and operations is very likely to be a cross-agency effort. And to give you some more context of our partnerships, I want to acknowledge that we're working with multiple interagency groups and facilitating partnerships between national laboratories supported by various agencies. This has already led to some positive outcomes, including educational efforts like the North American Carbon Program's CDR Academy, as well as support for public-private collaboration through the National Ocean Partnerships Program and numerous other CDR communities of practice in the academic, private, and nonprofit sectors. Given the conversation and momentum around negative emissions and carbon removal specifically, after all, JP Morgan just committed $200 million to removals just on May 23rd. It probably comes as no surprise that the science agencies are committed to studying these themes. That being said, I think it's worth digging into a little bit more detail beyond our motivation than just that. Our core context for the NOAA CDR strategy is rooted in science, really the implementation of a US CDR framework. In 2019 and in 2020, we initially became interested in carbon removal research as multiple outside colleagues requested information from our agency on carbon removal techniques, in part in response to growing scientific consensus that carbon removal will be a necessary part of achieving our climate goals. There are many ways to show that necessity. I've chosen just one here on the left. This bar chart indicates the proportion of IPCC scenarios from the AR6 report that rely on CDR to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius with limited overshoot. That's the first set of bars. 1.5 degrees Celsius with extensive overshoot. That's the second set of bars. And 2 degrees Celsius, the third set of bars. Two proxies for negative emissions, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, shown in blue, and direct air capture, shown in yellow, are imaged here. To achieve each climate goal, almost 100% of scenarios require negative emissions of some form. In fact, in the entire report, there's only one scenario that doesn't. And that was the one that was designed not to, and which was also designed to highlight how unrealistic the speed of emissions reductions would be in order to achieve our climate goals without CDR. However, it's also worth noting that the global commons is not ready to implement these removals at this speed and scale. CDR needs a lot more research to make the deployment in these bar charts look in any way, shape, or form realistic. So let's move on to the second panel here. It's clear that Congress has heard CDR is going to be a fact of confronting climate change. They've shown bipartisan energy and support for this across the last 2 administrations. Billions of dollars have been appropriated across multiple agencies, primarily the Department of Energy, and every major piece of new legislation since 2020. In some, NOAA has been directed to partner with DOE to implement the work outlined in these bills. In addition, the current administration has also made it a clear priority for the science agencies to address CDR research across multiple executive orders and reports. Relevant for Capitol Hill Oceans Week, marine CDR research was included as a key action supporting the goal of a carbon neutral future in the recent Ocean Climate Action Plan from the Ocean Policy Committee of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Third, panel on the right-hand side, NOAA's existing congressional mandates, highlighted here, the Federal Ocean Acidification Research and Monitoring Act, through it our mandate to mitigate ocean acidification, also indicate NOAA's role in marine CDR work. These kinds of products we know will support CDR decisions are the kinds that NOAA already develops. One clear analog to that is the NOAA Aquaculture Opportunities Program and its Coastal Aquaculture Planning Portal. These tools show scalable, interdisciplinary maps that highlight new aquaculture opportunities. These types of decision support tools were recently highlighted by the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law as essential components of streamlined aquaculture and potentially CDR implementation pathways in Maine and in Alaska. So understanding these three motivations, scientific consensus, congressional support, and clear connections to our mandate, what's actually in the strategy that we developed? So we split the content of the strategy into 4 parts. The first part is the federal motivation for CDR research, which you've essentially already heard summarized here on the last slide under the why part of our conversation. Part 2 included a review of CDR science. Part 3 highlights NOAA's key assets and equities that can create the kind of decision support products that our stakeholders are already asking for. And Part 4 is our vision of how that work may progress. I won't provide a summary of Part 1 again, you've already heard it from me, but I'll delve a little bit more into the other parts of the strategy. In Part 2, we offered a unique review of 13 strategies for removing carbon from the atmosphere. I want to note this was a brief review and it's not intended to replace other important review documents that have recently been released, including the National Academy studies on negative emissions or the National Academy study on ocean-based carbon removal. Overall, our brief review highlighted important open questions about long-term storage durability, measuring and monitoring CDR efficiency, life cycle analysis, and especially how we track ecosystem level impacts and co-benefits. 2 of the key figures from our findings can be seen here on the right. At top, we visualize here the cost on the x-axis and effectiveness on the y-axis, the durability, which is the size of the dot, of various CDR strategies. The shading of the dot indicates relevance to NOAA's mission. So large black dots in the upper left, for example, show low cost, highly effective, lasting CO2 removals that NOAA assets can clearly address. You can see ocean alkalinity enhancement popping out here. In the lower left quadrant, removals from coastal blue carbon also stick out as key components of NOAA's mission. Switching now to the bottom figure, here we highlight some of the potential ecosystem impacts of various CDR methods. I won't provide too much detail here beyond saying that these impacts can be many and varied, and more detail is available in the report. I'll also note that there is no CDR strategy that doesn't have a potential ecosystem impact associated with it. In Part 3, we highlight 4 key NOAA assets that will be essential to answering these questions. This table lists those 4 assets in the leftmost column, following with some key examples in the light blue shading, potential development of those assets in the third column, and finally the impact that the development could have on the CDR community in the rightmost column. Briefly, we know that at multiple time and space scales, NOAA's observing systems in the top row, modeling resources in the second row, ecosystem perspectives in the third row, and decision support tools in the fourth row have the potential to track CDR impacts on the Earth system and offer evidence-based perspectives on CDR implementation. In Part 4, we discuss how these assets could be applied or implemented at NOAA, moving from initial research to larger scale field trials that will inform the continuous design and iterative development of global and coastal observing arrays, modeling systems, ecosystem analysis, and decision support products that underpin the science, service, and stewardship components of NOAA's mission. We're committed to transparent, actionable research that supports collaborative, accountable, sustainable, and fair CDR research. So what's happening now? A draft of this strategy went through extensive internal and external review. Internally, the report was reviewed by more than 15 expert teams, the NOAA Science Council, and the NOAA policy team. External review, which many of you participated in, included a period of public comment in addition to invited consultation with academics, the private sector, nonprofits, and 3 other government agencies, the National Science Foundation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and 2 programs in the Department of Energy. Now the final report is available on the NOAA Science Council website, shown at the QR code on screen here, alongside a 2-page summary of the report's key findings, as well as access to our public reviews. Alongside the release of the NOAA CDR research strategy, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries has issued guidance for CDR in sanctuary settings. One key resource in this guidance document that doesn't appear in the CDR research strategy is a summary of existing regulations and how they may be relevant for CDR methods. You can find the National Marine Sanctuaries guidance at the QR code shown in the upper left. Meanwhile, as a result of our extensive interagency collaborations, NOAA has begun to engage in some CDR work. In both FY22 and fiscal year 2023, NOAA committed resources for CDR research to externally funded grants as part of the National Ocean Partnerships Program. The FY23 competition also included support from NOAA, NSF, DOE, Navy, and ClimateWorks, as well as consultation with the EPA. You can find more information about the call at the QR code shown on screen here. So I'll close by saying thank you for your time and attention as a part of the CHOW program here in Washington, D.C. Yesterday, we were able to visit the Oceans Caucus to discuss these issues as a part of Hill Day. And for those of you that are attending CHOW in person, we also have paper copies of the 2-page summary of our key findings available at the NOAA booth. I'll also be there tomorrow to answer any questions we don't have time to address today. For now, I'd like to pass the session back to Amanda to invite 2 of our key partners in NOAA's ongoing research portfolio of CDR and climate intervention to offer some of their remarks as well.
Thank you, Dr. Cross. We'll take questions at the end of the session if there is time. To provide some context for NOAA's ongoing work, we'd like to now invite 2 external speakers to join us. First up is Dr. Carrie Schmaus, a Marine Energy Technology Manager at the Water Power Technologies Office, or WPTO, at the U.S. Department of Energy, and a 2018 Young Professional Leader at the International Electrotechnical Commission. WPTO was a contributor to the National Ocean Partnerships Program initiative that Dr. Cross mentioned during her last talk. And she joins us today to discuss the intersections between NOAA and DOE CDR work, especially considering synergies with marine energy. And I will get you all queued up.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Carrie Schmaus here, Technology Manager at the Water Power Technologies Office. And I'm really thrilled to be here with this excellent panel. So let's just dive right in. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Water Power Technologies Office, we are an office in the Department of Energy, and our marine energy program mission is pretty simple. It's harness energy from the world's oceans. Resources included in that are listed there on the bottom left. It includes waves, tides, ocean and river current, as well as thermal salinity and pressure gradients. And I will note that does not include offshore wind. We do have a wind office that works on offshore wind. But for everything else in the ocean, that's the Water Power Office. And I've included some photos of some of our recent deployments there as well. Next slide, please. So just to contextualize marine energy a little bit, I wanted to share this diagram that shows all the energy out there in the US's oceans. And note that if we were able to harness the technical power potential for all these resources out there that we have, that would be equivalent to 57% of electricity generated in the US in 2019. So quite a substantial amount of energy out there. On the next slide, I'll dive in a little bit more about what the Water Power Office does. So in short, we are a research and development investment shop. We invest in both grid scale and non-grid scale technology. And our non-grid scale technology is called Powering the Blue Economy. And it's split up into Power at Sea, which is a portfolio that I lead, and Resilient Coastal Communities. of interest to this group in particular. And under our Power C portfolio, we invest in marine energy to power marine carbon dioxide removal, which you could use marine energy to power the MCDR approach itself. But we also invest in research that uses marine energy to power ocean observation, which is really important when we're thinking about MRV technologies and extending the range of those, as well as aquaculture, which is of course relevant to MCDR when we're thinking about things like marine algae. Next slide, please. Zooming out a little bit, I just wanted to provide some information about the Department of Energy's carbon negative shot. This is a whole department effort with the ultimate goal to get to less than 100% per net metric ton of CO2 equivalent for both capture and storage. And so as you can see from that diagram, there are many different CDR approaches included in this, but importantly, ocean-based CDR is one of those approaches. So if you see something about the carbon negative shot, that does include MCDR. Next slide, please. And to speak a little bit more about what the Department of Energy is doing in the CDR and MCDR world, I just wanted to provide this list of different offices, everything from FECM, which is the Fossil Energy and Carbon Management Office, to our friends here in the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, or EERE, which includes Bioenergy, Water Power Office, my office, the Buildings Technology Office, as well as the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, and then our friends over in the Office of Science and ARPA-E. So all I want you to take away from this slide is that a lot of folks at the Department of Energy are thinking about all the different dimensions of CDR and MCDR. Next slide, please. Just to highlight a couple of recent funding opportunities supported by FECM and ARPA-E. The one on the top there is field validation of abiotic ocean-based carbon removal. You can see they're going to select up to 10 projects at about $200K per project. They also recently selected 3 national labs through a lab call to work on carbon dioxide removal measurement, reporting, and verification best practices and capabilities. So some really excellent work will come out of that. And then our friends over at ARPA-E have a very cleverly named solicitation out called CCO2, which is Sensing Exports of Anthropogenic Carbon Through Ocean Observation. And that is open now. On the next slide, just wanted to highlight a few of our interagency coordination and collaboration efforts. Of course, we are really excited to dive in more to the NOAA strategy that Jessica just gave us such a wonderful overview of. And as she also mentioned, we were one of the offices that participated in the recent National Oceanographic Partnership Program Notice of Funding Opportunity for Research and Development for Assessing Large-Scale Carbon Removal and Local-Scale Ocean Acidification Mitigation. WPTO contributed funding along with our friends at Fossil Energy and Carbon Management, and I'll just say that was a really fun project to work on with those groups. We're really excited for future collaboration efforts. We also support foundational R&D in MCDR at one of our national labs, Pacific Northwest National Lab, and there's a little screenshot there from just last week. We participated in a jointly hosted PNNL PMEL MCDR workshop. And then on my last slide, just wanted to highlight a few other efforts that came out through the Ocean Climate Action Plan, which Jess also mentioned. MCDR is, I would say, featured in this plan, and which is really exciting to see. And DOE in particular is really excited to dive in and work with the rest of our federal agency friends on some of the things listed here. So this is not comprehensive. These are just a few key highlighted areas that DOE is noted in the OCAP. And so a couple of those are a federal research and scale testing program for promising MCDR approaches, launching a US MCDR initiative, ensuring that those robust, sustained, and adequate ocean observations are in place, as well as standards for carbon accounting, and then importantly, looking at the environmental and social impacts of MCDR, and last but certainly not least, perhaps most importantly, in fact, incorporating environmental justice and equity. And so as you can see, there are lots of work coming down the pipe, something that we at WPTO and the Department of Energy at large are really excited to work on with our interagency partners. So I will leave it there. The last slide does have my email. If folks have any questions, I would love to hear from you. Please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, To round out our session, we'll invite Frances Wang, Associate Director for Carbon Dioxide Removal at the Climate Works Foundation. She holds a Master of Science in Environmental Change and Management from Oxford University with a focus on energy policy and practice, and a BA in Economics from McGill University. She continues to publish high-quality academic research in addition to her duties shaping the community with targeted CDR investments. ClimateWorks was also a contributor to the National Ocean Partnerships Program Marine CDR Initiative.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I do not have slides because I'm here today to talk about why we, as a public charity and a philanthropy, are especially excited about this research strategy. As many of you might know, ClimateWorks is a global platform that helps philanthropy to achieve a just, equitable, and effective solutions for the climate crisis. We know from the alarming UN findings earlier this year about the impending potential of reaching 1.5 degrees, which some of my other panelists have also talked about. And the IPCC and the National Academy study all show that virtually all pathways require both taking emissions to zero and removing emissions from the atmosphere. So with that, as a philanthropy program, our goal is to shed light on the challenges and opportunities of the carbon dioxide removal field and to help stakeholders build the necessary capacity to make independent and informed decisions when it comes to marine CDR. An important lesson I learned in the first years of the program is that robust marine CDR research can be costly, time-consuming, location-sensitive, and labor-intensive. This finding is supported by the National Academy's report, which recommended a whopping $2.5 billion over the next 10 years to validate the scientific efficacy of these approaches. But to date, CDR is about 6% of all philanthropic funding to climate, and the overall climate giving is less than 5% of all philanthropic donations. When it comes to marine CDR, less than 1% of global philanthropy goes into this topic. Given that most literature points to the need for a portfolio of negative emissions methods to avoid significant trade-offs, the lack of clear resources and guidance for this field means that we could be leaving solutions off the table. So we know that while philanthropy funding is necessary for bringing the attention to this underserved solution space, it alone is insufficient to move the needle in a meaningful timeframe while building the necessary capacity for a good governance system. And this is just one of the many reasons we're delighted to be a partner with NOAA and the US interagency effort on marine CDR. In particular, we're happy to contribute to the 2021 and 2022 funding call for marine carbon dioxide removal to advance responsible research. Through this partnership, we're able to support complementary social science research into bolstering justice and equity components of responsible marine CDR design, help researchers discover each other and form productive partnerships to advance their scientific inquiries, as well as to build capacity within civil society and other stakeholders to align effort on this topic. We believed from the beginning that public and private sector partnership would be the key to the responsible development of this field. So putting my hat on as a history minor in college, I know that public funding has had a long history of successfully validating novel approaches responsibly. For example, the DARPA program was critical in incubating and helping to scale important technologies such as the internet and artificial intelligence. These R&D initiatives that started in the 1950s that has become a viable and essential technologies we rely on today. And furthermore, government-led engagement mechanisms were critical to ensuring novel technologies met ethical standards. Some of you might remember the Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee at the NIH, which provided critical education and engagement with the public on controversial issues such as gene editing. And NOAA has had a long history of leading responsible science research with robust observational and field expertise and networks, and we deeply value their leadership in creating the roadmap for responsible marine CDR science. In particular, we're delighted to see that diversity, equity, and inclusion in alignment with Justice 40 is a necessary piece of the recent NOAA funding call for marine CDR, as well as this research of the CDR science strategy that was released today. So these and many other examples demonstrate the critical role the federal government plays in the development and adoption of new technologies and how critical the agencies will be for the marine CDR field. And finally, I just want to say that marine CDR is enjoying its spotlight right now. In addition to the federal blueprint that some of my other panelists have mentioned, marine CDR is also featured as part of the US long-term strategy for climate change, contributing to the overall negative emissions push. This topic is also on the agenda for many UN Ocean Decade partners and taking the stage in international gatherings such as the UN Ocean Conference and at COP27. So we're delighted to see the Biden administration taking a step change in the right direction to further the US leadership on science-based and meaningful actions around climate. And some of this investment has already helped to advance marine CDR research. And these are proof that we are at an exciting turning point for this particular field. And it's important that we get it right, refocusing efforts on responsible science. And I think NOAA's CDR research strategy will provide just that. So a huge thanks to all of you who have played a role in getting us here. And I look forward to continue working with you as we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Frances. We may have time for one question. I'm surprised we finished a little earlier. If anyone has a question, wants to raise their hand or put it in the chat, go ahead.
Just speaks to how well we did.
Really covered everything.
Okay. I'll make a brief note that those of you who are in town in Washington, D.C., there's a handful of us that are going to meet at the Hamilton now at 5:30 if you have an interest in CDR to touch base for a few minutes before heading to the fish fry if you were able to get tickets to the NOAA Sustainable Seafood Celebration. Hope to see you there.
Okay, I don't see any questions popping up, so I'll just go ahead and close us a couple minutes early if everyone's okay with that. Thanks for joining us today for supporting a climate-ready nation, NOAA's CDR research strategy. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact any of our speakers by email. Dr. Cross will also be available in person to answer any questions at NOAA's booth in the CHOW Expo Hall during the lunch portion of the agenda tomorrow. It was lovely having you all with us. Thanks for joining.